Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on this very overcast, somber mood day in Harare. It's been one heck of, the last 24 hours have been quite hectic, if one could describe it as such. I flew into Harare this morning, and I must say, the sadness and the mood, melancholic mood in the air, was only contested by the overcast weather. What's happening in Harare?
I don't know. I don't know what's in the water, but this budget is it's hard to believe. It's incredulous. How was your travels? I saw I saw you guys having some very juicy steaks. How do you rate the meat in Nairobi versus Harare?
Terrible. I think
We're doing
Harare,
much better.
way better, way better. I think that we know how to actually prepare.
Steaks.
I asked for our usual,
A blue, yeah.
but you know what came?
They decided you. Oh my
Well.
god.
They decided that I was better off with the medium well. So
That's disappointing.
very, very, very disappointing. But
Yeah, there I am, a peasant listening to
Yeah, this guy would.
wealthy individuals talking about how well they want their meat done. And I guess it justifies some of the taxes that you're seeing, because the disparities in the level of wealth in even on set here, it's unbelievable.
so you reckon our steak needs to be taxed
It needs
higher?
to be taxed, yes. Even more.
But I must say,
Especially
what
the
I
more
find-
rare it is.
But
I think the higher the taxes should be. But for a commoner, it's not, there are no common people there who would ask
the,
for
the running joke.
Uh.
If you have your steak well done, the running joke is it's not Ash Wednesday. That's the only time when we burn our steaks.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting? Just on that is I passed through Johannesburg and I had a steak there, and it's reasonably priced. I think half the price that you will pay for a good steak
In Harare.
Yeah.
No, we pay for more for everything here.
But we all know we've been working in this environment, running businesses here, and I think also from this budget, what will come out clear is there are always some extra costs that a typical business in Joburg or in Nairobi would not anticipate. Those guys could actually plan for the next year to 5 years out, but in Zimbabwe, even planning for a month, a week, it's so difficult. And I'm actually concerned that a day after the budget announcement is described as being somber. Growing up, the announcement was always accompanied or welcomed by excitement because of the bonus thresholds, the payees. They used to be big kind of announcement, especially for the people, the common man who was not really interested in the big
you guys
economics.
are so excited. You want to get into the weeds so early on. We'll get there. We'll get there, everybody. There's a lot that we need to discuss, and I think there's a way in which we have framed the discussion. But before we do that, I haven't seen you in a while. For a while, we did miss you. We missed you as well. We had George and a number of guys up in Nairobi, and we had so much fun.
I can imagine. Did you guys behave well?
If I'm there, I know that people will behave. I'm the policeman of the group, so I ensure that people actually behave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's a lot that's happening. Buildings are still going up in Nairobi, and the government is opening up. It's a tough environment, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the business. I thought this is something that you would love, because the business association actually wrote a letter to the government, and it clearly laid out the problems that are in
The
in
economy,
Kenya,
yeah,
the
yeah.
economy, and what they should do. But yeah, it's there's tight liquidity. They obviously have problems, but I think that they have shown that it's very possible for a government to actually address the core
Issues,
issues and to listen and not to lie. What we tend to do is the obvious here in Harare is, we sweep it under the carpet and we just don't talk about it. Whereas in Kenya, they talk about this. So they're talking about NPLs, they're rising. That's the
Non-performing
discussion.
loans in the banks. Yeah.
Yeah, non-performing loans in the banks, and that's a discussion you will never see or never hear.
Yeah, but one of the differences I think between Kenya and Zim is that the business community in Kenya and the government in Kenya have a much better relationship, I think, of mutual trust and respect than we have here. So here, the sense that I have when I think about the relationship between government and the business community is that the business community is viewed with suspicion by government. We're not trusted. You hear this language about us profiteering and being economic saboteurs. And,
being wealthy.
And you'd never hear the government of Kenya making such statements. So I think that's one of the reasons why we find ourselves in the conundrum that we're in, because I think business is a lot positively to contribute to macroeconomic policy. And if our voice is missing, then this is one of the reasons why things, don't work.
We'll get into that. But you're wearing black, comrades. What's happening there? What are you drinking?
Yeah. So, it's on a gloomy day like this, I've decided to go for something that's cask strength. I really need I feel like I need a stiff drink. And so I've gone to a place where I can't go wrong, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and they have this wonderful PT bottle called they're very cantankerous with their names, and this one is called Smoked Cloudy Mild Cider. So I think this will help me with my budget wars.
Oh, fantastic. Well, there's a new sugar tax that's coming on board, and I believe that very soon we shall not be having our usual mazoe. So I thought, let me actually have mazoe. Well, I've actually missed it, but also because
it's not available in Nairobi.
It's going to be a luxury very, very, very soon.
Because I know that they export to South Africa.
I didn't see it, and I don't think you would see. I'm sure they have their own Kodiak drinks, but yeah, I'm gonna have my mazoe because this might actually be the last few times I will have mazoe.
I think you'll still be able to afford it. I don't think you'll like the sticker price, but I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I won't be able to afford it.
So what is it with you guys? On hot sunny days, you have a hot beverage, you have tea. On a cool day like today, it looks like it might even rain. You're having, these soft drinks with ice.
Well, this is primarily because I don't think that I will be able to have my sugar drinks any.
And then Ranga over there complaining about this side of the table being wealthier is having fruit juice, which is a luxury in this country.
You're going to be able to afford that.
It's quite aspirational, and just to be in that tune that maybe sugar is actually being declared an enemy of sorts. And I was just sitting there wondering, would you say we've got a sugar consumption problem in Zimbabwe? I mean, when you look at it, someone can actually stand up and then make a pitch that, no, the consumption of sugar in Zimbabwe is terrible. We have to do something about it. How about Tojika Sadza? If you're worried about carbohydrates, starch, or whatever.
Yeah.
So the next text is going to come on what? Millimil?
Yeah, look, that's it's rich. Although sugar is bad for you, but still, I think like the libertarian part of me feels strongly. It's none of government's business.
Do you think they're taxing it because they think it's better for us?
No, they're taxing us, and
because it hasn't been taxed.
No, because they broke.
Yeah. Okay, so let's lay the land. What are we actually discussing? How do we want to approach this? So let me perhaps start with a preamble. I got a lot of WhatsApp messages, a lot of calls from lots of business people, lots of people who were worried. And I think one message that succinctly put it across said this was the worst budget that they had come across in their adult life. Someone called it evil. Another person called it, Panich Kwambo. These guys are possessed.
Oh my gosh.
But those...
That was too strong.
Yeah. But it tells you, we never get to the core of the issues, right? So I think it got me thinking, and that's where I would like us to start. Yeah, because it got me thinking that maybe before we get into the weeds, perhaps let's zoom out and let's think about why this budget was presented the way it has been presented. You know, why someone like Mtuli, who is a celebrated economist, would know who the Laffer curve is, that there's a point in which there is a disincentive or diseconomies of taxing people more. You can tax people only so much, beyond which there is a great incentive, perverse, however, for people to not pay tax, to actually avoid tax. And, some of the suggestions were so ridiculous. I mean, if you think about the 1% tax that they want to introduce on properties above 100,000, if you think about it, let's suppose we have 200,000 homes that are averaging around the 100,000. That would be about 20 billion. That's the 1% is only, you're the mathematician, 200 million. Yeah. So if you think about it, all this hullabaloo, all this angst, just so that they can collect 200 million. 200 million, to give you context, would not even feature in the big heads of taxes. Your VAT, your MIT, which is actually reduced, your customs, everything. It won't even feature. And yet they're going through all
And
this.
it caused a lot of consternation.
All this consternation, all this angst, all this trouble, so that you could take this little, which is 200 million US, which maybe they just testing the waters, because if they wanted to be a large tax head, they're going to have to increase that tax. And you're not taxing savings. So you're breaking Laffer's curve rule. You're taxing savings in a country that actually doesn't have any savings. Like, the only thing that people have are their homes. But for the poor, what are you doing? You're increasing toll gates. A lot of the poor, they use commercial transport to move from cities. They've actually increased. So, the poor are going to be hardest hit. Increase in fuel tax, increase in car tax. There's just so much tax that's going around.
I think you're getting lost in the weeds, or you're getting into the weeds at a very high level.
No. I know you're excited. So I'm actually going to start with Ranga.
That's fine.
I know you're excited. But there's a reason why I'm doing this, is because I want to give us a bit of color on the motives of this particular budget. Because if we get to the motive, maybe the audience, maybe business, maybe society might have a better appreciation of where Mtuli, if Mtuli is about Mtuli, or the government is coming from. What do you think the motivation was? This particular budget. So, given that color, that Mtuli is aware of the economics of taxation, what we term public finance, do not think that he's ignorant of it. He's very much aware of it, but he still goes ahead and he produces such a budget. So what is the context? What do you think? Speculate if you must, and we will allow you to speculate.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kanya. So the numbers were not balancing. So the revenue expenditure play wasn't balancing, and yet there's no intention to rein in on the expenditure side. So I think Mtuli was just instructed to find ways of collecting for us more revenue, notwithstanding the fact that the tax base itself is actually becoming smaller and smaller. So he had to dig deeper, look for other avenues where he could get some more money. I don't think any conversations around trying to live within our means, or maybe to try to curtail certain unnecessary expenditure, was going to be entertained. So there's that aspect. And also the reality that we are not the most liked country at the moment. So certainly we are not going to be raising money offshore. everything that we've done to the investors, the fact that we have got these arrears, and when you look even at the lower level portfolio flows, they've been taking actually more money has been getting out of the country. So there's that pressure to try and get as much money as possible. But I would also want to add a fairly controversial angle that I don't know, it also looks like it's a subtle attack on the middle class. In a way, I don't know if there's a political view from the people in Harare, Blawayo. So if you can get as much as possible from them, because these people, maybe they vote for the opposition or something like that. You allowed me to speculate,
Yes,
right?
yes, please.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things. And I don't think there's any thought that has actually been put into it to try and at least promote economic growth, the business that are stood there so that they can produce more and etc. And even the much loved, much talked about informal sector, it's also coming under attack, where they're saying that they have to only licensed businesses, operators.
So if I get you correctly, you're saying they are political considerations?
Yes, that's my speculation.
There's a gap between revenue and
expenditure,
and external
financing not coming our way.
So they're in a tight corner.
And also you can't then rule out the impact of lobbies. So maybe there's people out there who say, no, we this is the amount of support that we put in. So maybe we want this in return. And I think I would pinpoint road guys, those construction guys. Yeah, probably they are owed. We know they are owed lots of money, and it's probably their time to eat. To eat. So
just one thing, because I cannot allow you to get away with it. There's an obvious thing that we could have done. So if you look at VAT, I think they actually reduced it the last time, and it's around 14.5%. They could have increased it to 30%. They could have said, you know what, guys, we've got a gap. These are the realities that we face, and we're going to increase our VAT, and it will get to 30%. It's nothing unusual. It's there in the world. They could have done that. And they could have actually collected more, because you don't need to put up new systems. When you look at the wealth tax, everything that they've increased, you need to put up, there's a cost of infrastructure that you need to put up. But they could have done that. They could have just increased the overall taxes that they have by a certain percentage and still achieve what they wanted to. We would, whinge about it and we'll talk about it. But it seems to me that would have been a better way of going about it. What do you say to that? Why are they introducing new tax heads?
Probably they are preparing you for the future. So it doesn't mean that they can't they can't increase the VAT. But I think as far as they are concerned, expanding maybe areas from which they can tax you from actually give them more room into the future. Okay. And I think with what they've seen with IMTT, the tax on the money.
Well, it's actually reduced.
Yeah.
Which is something we'll get into.
No. But I think the importance of that point was they introduced a new tax. And for a long time, people were whinging, making some noises. Over time, we got used to it, went to them, kept in hand. At least we can reduce it. Okay. So now we've come to accept that it's a reality of how we do business here. Then they introduce wealth tax. They're introducing.
Okay, they're just increasing them, and then eventually they then increase.
Exactly, that number can be increased from 1% to 10%. Whatever. Or in fact, they could say no. Why not 50,000 or even 10,000? And someone was joking on social media that is it some sort of hard tax? When the pioneer color, the BSA came, they introduced some tax on everyone who had some hard. So it looks.
But that was actually I tend to disagree with that because the hard tax was introduced to force people to work, because that now you had to pay a tax. So they introduced, because people didn't have to work. They didn't have to.
They didn't have to work for settlers.
For the settlers,
they were independent.
Exactly. So they introduced a hard tax because they were like, well, now you need to earn a living. And then there was labor for. the settlers. But anyway, that's a different point. So for you, Shumba, I'm gonna give you a carte blanche, blank page, because I know that's what you want. And so it's not gonna come as a question, but it's gonna come as, can you give us your overall perception and comment on this budget? What are your thoughts?
So I think, firstly, I just want to say I tend to agree with a lot that Ranga said. But at a high level, I think what's important and what's really disappointing about this budget is that it's not serious. How do you present a budget in an economy in which 80% plus of the transactions are in US dollars? How do you present that in Zim dollars and expect any of the stakeholders to take you seriously? Whether it's individuals and corporates, whether it's foreign creditors, whether it's potential foreign investors, who can make sense of these numbers? If I say to you that the 2023 budget was $4.2 trillion, what does that number mean to you? Like, can you wrap it around your brain? If you were sitting in the audience as this budget was being announced and you're told that, the 2024 budget is 58.2 trillion, would you nod your head and say, yeah, sounds about right? Like, that's a reasonable number. Like, does that number mean anything?
It means hyperinflation.
It's ridiculous. I'll share an anecdote to drive home the point that this is just not a serious budget. So I was at an analyst briefing for one of the listed companies, and I'm not going to name them because I'm not trying to embarrass the management, but they presented their finance director, right, who's a very smart guy, qualified chartered accountant with lots of experience, presented Zim dollar financials, right? And as he's addressing an audience full of analysts trying to understand the business, he himself says, "You know what? I don't understand these numbers." And there isn't anybody running any kind of organization in Zimbabwe today that is working with Zim dollar numbers, right? So when you present a budget in Zim dollar numbers, right, and the budget document was 44 pages, maybe to be politically correct, it had to.
No, that's what he presented.
Right.
The actual budget statement is 256
right.
pages.
So is there an addendum in there with US dollar numbers at the back? No, right? So it's not a serious budget, right?
Can I ask you a question? So, Zim dollars, US dollars, which currency do you think is easier to fudge? I mean, okay, so you are running this opaque system, and because the numbers that you are budgeting for, you never really attain them. We've got this coordination bill and this habit of us not really sticking to the budget. Which number do you think would serve someone in that situation better? A US dollar stable, transparent, or some number that we can't make the head and tail of?
Of course, the Zim dollars that's what they're useful for. So
that's the incentive. That could be the incentive.
They're not serious numbers, and I'm gobsmacked because we know for a fact that there are lots of smart, highly educated individuals working in Treasury with global exposure, right? They've worked for prestigious institutions like Oxford, right? So how do they?
Well, I think to give you a bit of background, a lot of the economists, they're just as bewildered as we are, right? So I don't think that this budget came from the people in Treasury. I think that Ranga might be onto something as far as lobbyists are concerned. That I think that these were suggestions made by extremely powerful people politically, who have no iota of economic thought in them. So first is the economic thought. It's lacking. It's lacking economic thought. And by economic thought, I mean, you could argue this is a demand-driven economy, or it could be a supply side. So fair enough, we're supply side economists, so we would always whinge and have problems with the demand side economics. But if you look at this, there's no thought. The idea, like I included the idea of Laffer curve, right? The economist within Treasury would have known this. and they would have said that, if you tax 1%, if you look at the number, it's a hypothesis. This is how much you're going to earn. You could earn 200 million by just increasing VAT by 2 percentage points, right? Because there is a great disincentive at the moment that people will take their savings. Construction companies, construction is just simply going to collapse, or they will move to Zambia or Kenya or elsewhere. So I don't think there's economic thought. Second, I don't think there's technical input in the budget. People are making fun of how, your Coke, because of the sugar tax, Coke will cost 2-liter Coke will suddenly cost about $14 or so. Like, there hasn't been any thought. You can't say,
makes sense.
That makes sense. But what you can see is the impact of lobbies. That there's somebody who came and said, no, tax sugar. No, tax Zimba. Vanhu vane Zimba. Ukangofamba vanhu vari kuvaka zvisingamboiti. Dzimba dzese zvozoinda vanhu vari kuvaka. Not realizing that you've got a big component of diasporans who are building houses or building homes for their pensionless parents. Right? Not knowing that you have lots of people who lost money, who lost their savings in the 90s and in 2000 because of hyperinflation. And the only asset that they now have, not knowing that this asset that's owned by these people is not earning anything at all. And they don't have any income. So you're taxing them. Where do you think they will get the income to pay the tax? It's like in California, they're actually introducing a wealth tax and people are leaving. Go figure. But the most important thing is you must have income to pay the tax. So where do they think? You're talking about a small coterie of people who
are renting out the property.
Not just renting out, have built the property by ill-gotten wealth. It's a very small coterie of people. And those are the ones, whatever fights are happening, that is what is translated to this tax that's now affecting everybody. Potentially 200,000. I would say about 100,000 homes in Zimbabwe, which is sad. So I don't think that Treasury economists put this across. I think this is a political budget, and which is what I want to address, because I think you talked about it for a bit. If we do agree that it's a political budget, or do you disagree? Because this is not economics.
That was part of my earlier speculation.
Yeah. So if it's a political budget, what's the end game?
Because this is not going to make them popular.
Yeah, that's what we wanna see what the end game is. Is you do this, and savings go to South Africa. People will take. Not that there's anyone who still keeps money in their cash box. No, I mean, people. If you have $100,000 today and you walk into Zambia, they will open their bank accounts for you with open arms. You can open a bank account in Botswana, no questions asked. You can open a bank account in South Africa, non-resident account. No one is keeping significant amounts of money in those cash boxes.
Well, if they were, I don't think it's true anymore 24 hours later. Because why would you do that? Like why would you... I actually think that if the National Mattress Bank was actually had a marketing campaign and spending money after the announcements, I would actually just shut down the marketing department, because nobody is marketing them better than the government, right?
Yeah.
Because people are going to watch that and they're going to say, wait, what? I can wake up one day.
So Rufaro, go back to my question. What's the end game? What's the political end game?
So
Why would you do this? What's the political end game?
So I think it's a siege mentality budget. So somebody made the analogy about economic policy during UDI, between 1965 and 1980, when the Rhodesian regime under Smith was under sanctions, right? So they had to figure out how to bust sanctions, and so they were very inward looking, right? And they weren't being ambitious. They weren't thinking about growth, right? And I think it's a fantastic analogy because this is what this budget speaks to. They're not thinking about growing this economy over the next 5 years and raising money, restructuring debt, doing.
But the difference with what the UDI government was doing is they were inward looking, and by being inward looking, they were actually supporting the local businesses. We are destroying local businesses, So it looks like as long as we are making the lobbyists and the politically connected happy, then that's fine. All these things that we have right now, the older institutions were created just after UDI because they realized that they were not going to get support. There were sanctions and things like that. So the farmers, they had to be supported, to be funded, and all these import substitution industries, they came about. So there was actually a deliberate government policy to actually support the local businesses. We are actually doing the opposite. We are actually doing the opposite, where we are going after everyone that is perceived to have some sort of value. And to your point, you can't say someone who has got 100,000 is wealthy. I mean, when you're looking at the portfolio or how much worth someone is, there are a lot of things that are on their balance sheet that we need to consider, right? Besides maybe other asset classes, but also there are certain liabilities that may be there. What you're seeing is probably a building, a house, or whatever. And for most of them, it's that's their saving, that's their pension. There's a whole generation of people right now in their 40s who we know that when you get into our 60, beyond 65, you didn't have any pension kind of scheme unless you were smart enough or had capacity to do it offshore. So that is something that you are looking forward to, right? So it doesn't represent an amount of wealth that says, I'm rich, look at me. Yeah, you see.
It's mind-boggling when you think about what is happening in the real estate sector in Kenya, right? You have all these ill-gotten wealth that people are investing in Kenya, and you see it by buildings that go up, and you can't recognize the contractor. So it's always a new Mbinga contractor, but it doesn't matter.
They're building the country.
They're building the country. The building is there, and some sort of activity, GDP is coming out of it, and people are accessing the facilities. So when you come to Zim, it's like, okay, ill-gotten wealth in Zimbabwe. First of all, we're saying if somebody's actually investing in Zimbabwe with the ill-gotten wealth, that's actually a good thing because they could take that money and put it in Dubai. But they decided that they're going to spend it, whether they're buying a car and they're paying their taxes or they're actually helping the local economy by constructing whatever home.
I think those are more decent criminals.
Very decent criminals.
Yeah, because the actual criminals, they are taking money outside the country, building other countries, stashing cash there. I mean, we hear it a lot for most African countries. So I think these guys, who are putting money into Zim, whether it's some small operation or building houses or construction of whatever,
they're helping the economy.
They're helping the economy. They're creating, actually, they're adding to the GDP because they are hiring the locals,
buying from local producers.
I mean, we have got the cement shortage besides operational issues, but it tells you there's demand for that product, right?
So I want to put something to you because, we talked about the political ends and why. I think that part of what's motivating this is jealousy. People tend to underestimate how jealousy informs political thought and policy, public policy. Because if you think about it, recently, not that I want to name names, but I just want to put context, there was a big function with Ken Sharp, because he's the largest construction company. He's doing a lot of houses. His ambition is to build 1 billion bricks, I believe, or something to that effect. But the president actually went. And usually the president goes to these functions with an entourage of people. And I think that a lot of people would not be happy to see what Ken Sharp is doing. And I think that that would have cemented the argument that Zimbabwe, look at what they're building. Look at all these buildings. Let's tax them. Somebody would have said that while having, sorry, but it's usually whiskey.
Yeah, you can't
Motivated.
be
Mazoe.
You can't be Mazoe or so.
Or other sterner
some
stuff. But it's usually in those wee hours, guys are having a drink and they're like, why is he doing that? We need to tax people. Not realizing that you're actually killing the construction industry. And a lot of these people, they play around in Dubai. They never really play around African countries. To realize that there's a lot that's actually happening in African countries. There's a lot of development that's happening, especially around construction, right? And that's an entire industry. Why would you want to kill it? I have no idea, except that perhaps jealousy plays a big role. And what we are seeing in the budget are, fronting of factions that are jealous of one another, and it's playing out as public policy.
Yeah, look, but also you have to appreciate how our politics is played here. So our politics thrives on poverty because that gives you an opportunity to be giving out input schemes, supporting these vulnerable groups and etc. And obviously, I don't know whether it's coincidence, but because of the general aspiration of the middle class, who are always looking for further improvement, it's generally the middle class that are looking for alternative political homes, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess that, in my view, again speculating, that's why it was probably easy. That's why it's probably easy to come up with those kind of taxes because they're going straight into
someone's pocket.
Yeah, someone's pocket, someone that is outside our people, as it were. And
so a reward of some sort.
So I don't think jealousy is what's at play here. So if you
I think partly.
So
I think it's a confluence of issues.
So if you actually,
but I think there's a big part.
If you actually listen to what government says all the time when they talk about business people being economic saboteurs, profiteering, right? If you apply your mind a little bit and ask the question, who are these people that they are talking about when they say these things? When they say you're profiteering, when they say you're economic saboteurs, it's the cohort of Zimbabweans that own homes that cost 100,000 plus. That's actually the demographic, right? And they're saying you guys are the business people, you're profiteering, you're not paying your fair share in taxes. We need to find you somehow, right?
But that's 1%. That's less than 1%.
Yes, but
a lot of the people own homes that are 100,000. It's
100,000 plus, yeah. But my take is that it's a demographic that they think is profiteering. It's not contributing their fair share in taxes. They are also economic saboteurs who are playing on the parallel market, who are pushing the adoption of the US dollar. These are the people who own the tuck shops. When they do well in the informal business, they buy nice homes, on the right side of Samara Machel. So we must find them and we must tax them. And maybe, like you hinted, 1% is just a starting number, right? When they set up the infrastructure and they start collecting this money, they might decide, actually, let's make it 3%. Let's make it 5%, So I think there's this, they have this view about the business community and the people in it that is, they don't hold us in high esteem.
Okay. All right. So another point that I wanted to highlight, it's on, I think we talked about it with someone who's actually well-versed and who's got a bit of knowledge in this, the national psyche. So I want to talk about inflation because, the wealth tax, if you think about it, inflation is a tax and it's a savings
That's
tax.
our biggest tax.
That's our biggest tax is
not
inflation.
anymore now that the Zim dollar is dying, but certainly when the Zim dollar
but there's something I want to capture, which is around the national psyche, especially with regards to treasury and government policy, that when they allowed the inflation tax or hyperinflation to happen, something affected
They
treasury.
didn't allow it to happen. They made it happen. There's a big difference.
I'm kinder with my words than you are. But what I'm trying to capture here is there's a certain mindset that creates inflation, that creates hyperinflation. There's a certain mindset, and sometimes that mindset doesn't go away, and it hasn't gone away, because you remember we dollarized by force, so the market dollarized. It's not that they wanted to. If you remember well, that we've gone through these bouts of hyperinflation 3 times. So that mentality is still there. What if, and this is just a hypothesis again, because I think it's a confluence of issues, but I think it plays a big role, that they realize that they cannot. So you've got this, as Ranga says, you've got a number of contractors that haven't been paid. And you know that if you print or you are whatever you do with the nostrils or you print, you're going to create hyperinflation. But the mentality hasn't changed. So they're like, okay, what else can we do? What's equivalent to hyperinflation? Well, a tax on savings, right? Because it balances out. Because the guy who's gaining from it, it's government. Never mind the corruption and everything around it, but they know that monetarily they cannot print as much as they used to, because the market will just dollarize on its own. So the next best thing that you can do is you see all these houses and you think, well, let's tax the wealth and let's see what happens. So the point I wanted to drive home is seeing this confluence of issues that are driving the budgetary process. Is there a way out? Is there something that we're missing that we could come 3-4 years time and we're like, whoa, that truly man, he's truly a genius. We all didn't see this.
No. I can say that with very high conviction. We're not going to wake up 2-3-4 years from now, look back at this budget and think that was a stroke of genius. That's definitely not going to happen.
Okay. We're more likely to see savings move out of Zimbabwe.
Yep.
Right. So construction companies, all this, your asset managers, they're more likely to start thinking more and more, how do we move money out? Your diasporans who were building a lot of these houses are starting to see that it's now going to be a cost. So before it wasn't a cost, you were earning pounds, dollars, wherever, and you were building your home because that's the saving you had. Suddenly it's a cost. Do you think that diasporans are going to move out? That their savings, they will place their savings in the UK, in South Africa, rather than in Zimbabwe?
All those territories will look more attractive compared to Zimbabwe because of how consistently the policymakers are always looking to blame the ordinary citizen for the economic problems that that we have. It also just paints a bad picture on this whole issue around the property rights, because if there's one thing that I never dreamt of is someone would even think of wanting to open sort of search and seize someone's vault to see what's inside. I mean, so you see what's inside, what do you do?
They want to tax it.
They want to molest it. I think you guys, you're missing something important about this, which is the signal, right?
Yeah, that's what we're interested in.
Yeah, so if and I actually think that this is at an especially bad time for us to be making these kind of policy mistakes, because what's happening in the developed world, right, especially the Western world, is that they have their demographic time bomb is literally exploding right now. Their workforces are shrinking, which is why it's never been easier to emigrate to a place like the UK if you have skills, right? So when a budget like this is announced, what will happen is there's this huge cohort of Zimbabweans who are skilled or who are in the process of earnings or gaining skills. And they're probably thinking about the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years of their lives. And they, for whatever reason, they might have considered a future here. But when you have a budget like this that's just so awful, people then reconsider their thinking and they say, you know what, maybe it's they'd rather live and work in Zimbabwe, but maybe the UK makes more sense if this is the direction that the country is going. So I think that's actually going to drive a lot of skills out of Zim. And, because that person...
A law of unintended consequences.
Because that person who was thinking about buying a stand and building a home here, right? If they think that things are going to get progressively worse over the next 5-10 years, then maybe they're better off applying those savings to picking up a skill and emigrating. Mm-hmm. And then, when the madness stops, whenever that happens, they can then reconsider coming back to Zim. But we're actually driving... we were already in the middle of a brain drain, and we're actually adding fuel to that fire.
Okay, so gentlemen, what I want us to do now is to get into the weeds and talk about certain measures that the good professor has thought it wise to implement. So the first one, tax exemption.
So just before we get into the weeds, there was an interesting aside that you brought up earlier of. Are these ideas actually coming from Treasury, right? Because we know that they know better,
and the economists in Treasury know better.
Yeah. So where
they've done public finance, and it was a 2-semester course, public finance, and they understand that at a certain point, it actually doesn't make sense for people to be within the tax brackets. They will just move out. Yeah. Savers. How Monaco grew is because, the UK thought they were being wise, and the rich people just moved to Monaco.
Tax haven.
Tax haven.
Beautiful place.
People understand this. It's not rocket science. They know this. So there's no one in Treasury who was coming up and dreaming up these policies. I can guarantee that, and I'm willing to put my hat on it. I'm willing to eat a hat. if you can prove to me that an economist in Treasury thought this was a good idea. I doubt that very much. I think there was a political lobbyist who were coming up with these ideas. And remember, we've been listening to budgets since what?
For the longest
time. And we know when they're really trying to push the needle because they need that extra income. So an interesting anecdote before this, a good friend asked me, what should we look out for in the budget? I was like, look out for new taxes, because I know that these guys are strained for cash. They're actually looking for cash. But in my mind, I had VAT that probably, because they had reduced VAT, I thought, maybe they'll push it again to maybe even 17%. Yeah, because that's the big tax is actually VAT. So that's what contributes the most to our tax. So I thought that's where it's coming from. So it's not coming from Treasury. But go ahead with your thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, another thought popped up in my head, which is around the property that we were just discussing. Do you know what would actually be a fantastic and sensible property tax? Is if we gave everybody on a farm title deeds to their farm. And said, hey, this thing, it's not a gift for you to just sit on and retire on. You're supposed to be productive. If you're being productive, you should actually be able to pay a property tax. That's a function of how much land you have.
Well, you're backing my argument that it's really out of jealousy, because it's somebody who actually has a farm, who's driving to his farm and sees this wonderful house that's going up. And he says, how come I'm not making money on my farm? And I'm actually productive. How come this guy with his mansion on a hill, how is he making money? There was a story that the president told the one time. I think it was purchase or procurement industry. And he sort of made the off remark that, I drove and I saw all these houses. In Shashawasha was a house coming here, and I was wondering, how is it possible that people are building these houses? So I asked my guys, how is it possible that people are building these houses? Because I think, no, he didn't drive. It was a helicopter, right? And the guys gave him feedback. And they said, it's procurement, government procurement, corruption in government procurement. You can see what's feeding this fire. It's jealousy, envy, and petty jealousies, if you think about it. And I'm telling you, because you're saying a farmer must be taxed. The farmer who got land for free is struggling.
Well, he hasn't gotten land for free. He doesn't have title, right? So does he
He's
actually
got
own the
occupation.
land?
He's got free occupation. He's struggling, and he's seeing these houses on the side, these mansions, and he doesn't have time to actually apply his mind on why is that house up there. If you're really thinking about ill-gotten, then Kenya is a very good example. Kenya says, you know what, we don't care where the money is coming from, just build, because that actually helps our economy. That's what I would have taken. But anyway, here we are. Let's get into the weeds, ladies and gentlemen. So the first thing, and a lot of people are seeing it as a positive, but you're the analyst, you tell us, there's the tax exempt threshold on withholding tax on agricultural commodities. This is soya beans, sunflower, groundnuts, cotton. This has been moved from $1,000 to 5,000. So farmers are a good political constituents. So yeah, good or bad?
So in terms of policy framework, obviously, there's always a push to try and support the farmers. Yeah, and but I think we will not get out of this vicious circle if we keep supporting them in this kind of way. I actually think what Rufaro was proposing is actually the best way of doing that. Give them title to lend,
To farm,
yeah,
to borrow.
yes.
It actually increases. That's the supply side.
Exactly. And you can put some. The good thing about title and the legal issues around it is you can put some conditions on any title, even a title deeds. Yeah. When you want to transfer it to Rufaro, you can put conditions, probably to say, yes, I'm selling it to you,
but it must be a black guy.
Yes,
Which is silly.
Okay. All right.
No.
Okay.
I'm just saying there's that provision. So maybe as a good first step towards maybe giving people
Suspension of duty on motor vehicles imported by safari and tour operators. Good, bad?
I don't know that moves the needle.
But is the policy a good policy or a bad policy?
I think it's a good policy. Okay. I think we want to have more tourism. We want to see investment in tourism, and perhaps it actually doesn't go far enough in terms of actually incentivizing capital to be deployed in that space. Because I don't think that.
But why is government making the choice that it has to be safari and tour operators? I think it's a good thing. Even the first one, I think tax exemption is a supply side policy. I think it's a good thing, but I don't know why it's always restricted to farming
and to safaris
instead of
all of tourism.
Instead of all of business. Instead of all of business. Really, we should have a flat tax, and it should affect every business. It's not government's role to direct where capital should go.
Maybe they just want to give capacity to tour operators.
Why not small businesses?
Because these guys they're generating the foreign currency, and you want to get the tourists to come here and have a comfortable experience.
So I actually beg to differ, because I think that a lot of, if you look at tourism, especially the kind of tourism that is engaged in safaris and tours and that sort of thing, right? They pay for their package in Europe. They fly into Victoria Falls out of Cape Town or Joburg or some other hub like Dubai or Qatar. And Zimbabwe gets a tiny fraction of the actual value that the operator is getting offshore. Because, there's a perverse incentive for that, for things to be structured that way.
I just needed us to go through quite a bit. So suppliers restricted from selling goods to unlicensed vendors.
I think that's
manufacturers.
That's a big one. That's going to affect the manufacturers and also the informal sector.
So speak to it. Yeah.
So the manufacturers were actually benefiting from selling to these vendors.
The demand from the vendors.
Yeah, because there's demand aspect, but there's also the cash flow aspect, because these vendors are paying in cash. And look, we are in a market where there's no credit. So these businesses can't access US dollar financing from banks at a good rate. So they were self-financing. So these vendors or informal traders, they were selling to on cash. They were a good source of cash flow for this. And in a way, it then helped to keep the economy going, moving, and also try to avoid the issue of shortages. So you see, you know what will happen? The informal guy will just go across the border and buy that product. So the manufacturer is losing out on the sell itself, but also on the
Faro
cash.
says the siege mentality, the Ian Smith
On the
siege
cash
mentality.
as well.
VAT registration threshold reviewed downwards from 40,000 to 25,000.
Yeah, I think that's not a well thought out policy initiative, because who's paying VAT today as we speak? It's the formal sector, right? So, and if you think about our economy at a macroeconomic level, right? What is the trend in terms of the percentage that's informal versus the percentage that's formal? Is our economy trending? Is
Trending towards informal?
It's trending towards informal. So the formal sector already has all these challenges. They're already struggling. Okay, right? So if you reduce that threshold, you're simply punishing smaller businesses that were probably viable because they were so small that they didn't have the administrative headache.
Well, they were actually affected by withholding tax, right?
Right. So I don't understand it. It strikes me as scraping the barrel.
And how progressive is it? I mean, we should be actually increasing VAT threshold up as a reflection that we are moving towards being a middle income economy by 2030. We're actually becoming smaller and smaller to a point where everyone's going to pay VAT.
Introduction of domestic minimum top-up tax rules to guard against ceding tax rights to foreign jurisdiction on top-up tax arising from tax incentives.
Look, I looked at it. I didn't want to go into the details. We don't have that luxury. So we are this small, poor country that's desperate for investment, right? So I see what they're trying to do. So these accusations about how international businesses are transfer pricing, so they're paying lower taxes here, and then so we need to go and pick it up from the host country because they are enjoying the incentives. Why are you giving them incentives in the first time? It's because you want the capital, right?
Yeah.
So you give someone an incentive and a disincentive
at the same time.
At the same time.
2 years later.
Yeah, and that's the consistency or the lack thereof that is always a big problem.
So that's actually a big problem with this budget as well. It's like, do we have a macroeconomic policy theme that is consistent, right?
Apparently not.
And this budget is again making it clear that we're going to chop and change on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and gentlemen, it looks like we're not going to be able to change our cars. There's a 30% surcharge introduced in June towards motor vehicles with a minimum FOB value of 120,000 expanded. So FOB between 120 and 300,000, you're paying an extra surcharge. Beyond the 100% that you were paying already, you're paying an extra 30%, and above 700,000, you're paying an extra 50%.
Yeah. So all that's.
I mean, how many people really are buying cars that are
in
more
that price
than
range? So what you're actually signaling to all these people, right, is that if you are fortunate and privileged enough to be in the market for a $300,000, $400,000 car,
become a safari tour operator.
Well, there's that.
Then you just don't pay the tax.
But what you're really pushing them to do is what I always say when I discuss these matters is, if you're in the market for a $400,000 car, you really should have a home in Cape Town or Durban where you drive around that car on roads that don't have potholes, that you'll actually...
No, that's not up to you.
No.
You're making a judgment. You're moralizing an issue.
I'm not moralizing. I'm not moralizing.
If a guy decides that he has 1.5 million and he's willing to pay his tax on 1.5 million, to get his car in Harare. That's his choice.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying it's a foolish choice, right?
And you make a lot of foolish choices.
Yes.
And
Look, I'm human.
We allow you to be.
We're human.
So I think
I have an opinion,
the
right?
purpose of this is for us to discuss economics,
Yes,
not people's choices.
So I'm simply saying that is now an economic incentive to do what people in that demographic, I think, should always have been doing. If you're in the market for a Ferrari or for a Rolls Royce,
I think you're wrong. I think that most will just
pay
pick
the
up
tax.
pick up a Safari and Tour operator license and still import their car. But what I find
or
fun,
just driving them with a foreign registration.
yeah,
On
absolutely,
perpetual
GP.
TIPs.
Yeah, but what I find interesting is how many people are we really talking about here?
So they are going after those people. They are perceived to
That's
be.
why I say it's personal.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, guys, how many people? I mean, we're trying to run public policy. Yeah, we can't be targeting certain individuals. How many people have brought in a car that's worth 700,000 and above?
There's probably less than
And you
100
make a policy less than 100, less than 10, and you make policy
to affect
based on
these
that.
people.
But actually, if you look at, I think a bigger proportion of those top vehicles, they are mostly owned by government and government related businesses. So the land cruisers, Range Rovers, and etc.
No, but cars worth 700k. Like, how many cars are there in
in
all of Zimbabwe,
I don't,
that are worth
yeah.
more than 700k
Very
or
few.
400k even?
Very few, and it doesn't justify actually having a whole police announcement just to target those guys. If it wasn't, I think for the at some I didn't want quite. I mean, the argument that Nasha was making about jealousy, but if you start targeting 4 or 5 individuals, what are you saying? I mean, these are like any community is allowed to have outliers. And you may not get everything that you want from these guys, but each one of us, they actually are an economic agent or player at some form or another. So if you let them drive their $700,000 car, but you are going to get them on VAT or whatever their source of money that they have. But if you then
because
just craft,
if the guy is driving that car here, whether it's in Bulawayo or Harare or whatever, what it means is that they're actually spending time here, because this individual at that level can afford to spend all their time in Cape Town or Mauritius or Dubai, and wherever they spend time, they spend money. So you actually want that cohort to spend more time here.
We shouldn't be discussing a cohort of 10 people. We shouldn't be making public policy decisions based on 10 people. I think that's something else. Mining tax revenue contributions. No transfer of mining rights shall be approved without payment of capital gains tax, stamp duty, or any other duty or tax due on the value of the transaction.
yeah, look,
It's pretty standard.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. Obviously, mining, there's always this it's a natural resources.
Okay.
The thing.
So the second one is revenue derived from disposed mineral rights shall be shared equally with the state.
Yeah, that's basically telling people, anybody who's allocating capital and has a preference for mining assets, what we're telling them is, don't come to Zim with your capital.
Because if anything should go bad.
Why would you do that? Why? Like, if you were sitting in Joburg or Sydney or Toronto or any of these mining capital hubs, and you are managing a bunch of money that you want to allocate to frontier markets, whether it's DRC or Zim and places like that, when you read
Something like that. Yeah.
I-
You will love this one. Any lithium value addition process that does not result in production of lithium carbonates is liable to an export tax. Submission of beneficiation plans by lithium producing companies should be done by the 31st of March 2024. 1% levy on gross proceeds of lithium, black granite, and other cut and uncut dimensional stones and quarry stones introduced.
this is really bad policy. So I can attack this at a philosophical level and at specifically to do with lithium. right? So philosophically, what you want to do is you want to encourage as much investment into extraction as possible, right? If beneficiation makes sense, the investment to beneficiate will come through naturally,
happen naturally.
right? You don't have to, right? And the thing about commodities is that we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the prices of these things are going to be in 6 months or this time next year or in 5 years, right? And if you actually, and I'm going to use lithium as an example because you spoke about lithium, right? The lithium price has taken a massive beating over the last 12 months. So a project that might have made sense to beneficiate 12 months ago, today
make
might
sense.
Exactly. So this is an area where it's actually in the government's best interest to let the market make choices, and just be grateful that we have the resource endowment. And when somebody comes through into our country and invests in extraction, they're going to create employment. They're going to spend money in our jurisdiction. We're going to benefit.
Absolutely. Okay, tax on, well, no, not tax, but passport and selected fees. Ordinary passport have been increased from current fee of 120 to 200. That's the proposal. Can I tell you what happened? I got a new passport, right? Beautiful.
Okay.
So what I found interesting, because, the time in the world, so I just counted the number of people who were actually on that particular day, and it was a random day, so we could just take that anecdotally, but I think everyone has shared the same experience as I did, that I counted about 1,000 people.
Okay.
It was like counting sheep, but about 1,000 people. And I thought,
It's not politically correct.
and I thought, oh my gosh, the vendor and government must be making a lot of money. Now at 200,
They want to make more money.
they want to make more money, and lots of people are leaving the country, and they're punishing you. You must pay $200 to leave the country.
So they're punishing people for leaving the country because they've got opportunities for them locally.
Yeah.
Is that
No,
is that the
it's
thinking? So I actually think they're just looking for ways of getting money and more money.
somebody posted on social media. I don't know to what extent this is true, so forgive me if it's misinformation. But I think a passport in Zambia costs $14.
And it's the same passport, right? Apparently, it's the same vendor right across Africa.
Right. So, but we are going to be paying $200.
Well, yeah. And
it's just
emergency, $300. Vehicle registration, they're increasing that as well. So more and more taxes. The interesting one being sugar content on beverages, which we talked about 2 cents.
So
a gram of
$14.
sugar.
$14 for 2 liters of Coke. That just sounds like madness to me.
So I think those are the major highlights. In terms of incentives, as we've highlighted, maybe 2 incentives for agriculture and safari tour operators. Otherwise, nothing speaks to supply side. And economies grow on supply.
It's a bleak
Right?
budget. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it, actually.
Yeah.
It's really, really bleak.
Well,
Um,
there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's a bleak budget, but it allows us to get into a rabbit hole later on, which we shall, just to understand and to unpack really what's motivating the economic policy. And we'll get into what could business do. Maybe we just one last word from both of you. What can business do? Given a budget like this, what should business do?
It's a difficult one, because it's so businesses are in the planning phase right now, budget period, and all. So you want to plan for 2024 and the next 5 years, but you are in an environment where the policies are always shifting, and with the major underlying view of policymakers being that you guys are bad actors. So what can you do in an environment?
Leave the country. I mean, go elsewhere. I mean, what's stopping you from going into Zambia and abroad?
Look,
Because this pain will be with us for the next 5 years.
yeah,
It's not going away.
It might actually get worse. Actually, get out.
What do you mean might?
I mean, where we are right now. Okay, it will certainly get worse. it will certainly get worse. But also get a feeling that there's also a deliberate political position to replace the local businesses with businesses that are more aligned, pliable. So you find in all areas. So they've moved.
So again,
moved into,
political decisions
into mining. So I also get the feeling that even some of the retailers retailers that are being put under pressure, at some point you will see a giant retail outfit, and then they are creating a giant financial institution to rival Old Mutual. So I think so now they are starting off the big name kind of brands, big outfits, but it's probably going all the way down to a point where even for you to be a street vendor, you need to be properly aligned and pliable.
Okay.
I think it's a
What's your advice to business?
It's a wake up call for business. This idea of being politically correct, of being quiet, of
Quiet diplomacy.
yeah, it's not going to work, right? The writing is on the wall. Things are going to get worse. If you own a business or if you work in a business, the outlook is bleak. You're going to be poor, and so, like you said, either you exit the Zimbabwean market, if you've got skills and you find prosperity elsewhere, or if you want to stay, right? This is really a clarion call to actually band together as business and say, you know what, we actually need to engage government and influence macroeconomic policy so that we change direction. Otherwise,
I beg to differ. I think that boat has sailed. I think this budget is telling you that they're not going to listen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, their minds are set. It's going to get worse. I agree, but I think there's no use fighting government.
No. So people we're not talking about fighting. I'm talking about engagement.
People don't.
Well, that's how they will view it. So another person, this is what they said. They say, you know what? When you speak to government officials and public officials, it's like speaking to a brick wall. Like we've been saying the same thing for the last 20 years, and they just don't give a damn, right? And this is the feedback I get when I argue. Your case that you guys need to be like the Kenyans. You need to engage government. It's like no. It's like a brick wall. Like they just don't. Give. And then the one person, this is what they said. They went and engaged the authorities, and they're like, you know what? We told them that this is what we actually believe. The feedback that they got. They were told, oh, so you are now 80 Samora Machel, right? Are you? Yeah. In a very sarcastic that, they're the policymakers. You are not the policymakers. So these shock and awe measures are always going to come. That's just the siege mentality that our government inherited from Ian Smith. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I quite like the markets. And the markets behave quietly. They'll just move their capital. And I think that for a long time, Zimbabweans have been, even the diaspora have been supporting. But when they read this budget, when they read these things, the obvious thing should happen. We should just move our capital.
That they are coming after home. They're coming after the money
your spending habits
in
your wealth.
What will stop them from coming after the money literally under your mattress?
There you
because
go.
it's theirs, and
we can't continuously fight them. Let's just move our money across.
So I'd say maybe before someone takes a drastic action of moving your money across, I think they need to just explore opportunities to be invested in other countries. You still keep Zim as your base, and you go into friendly neighboring countries. You set up shop there
and build your mansions,
and you build
and build your cars in Cape Town and drive there. Your cars in Cape Town.
It's because I'm sure over time flights into Zim probably would increase. So if what's the how long does it take to fly from Joburg or Lusaka?
No, so I beg to differ. I think that's bad advice. I think as somebody
So what's your advice?
who's never left Zim, one of the major sources of optimism, right, was this idea, which turned out to be false, that all of our problems are in the person of Robert Mugabe. And the moment he exits power or exits the stage, we're going to have the most fantastic time, right? And, the analysis and the consensus was that given his advanced age, this is inevitable. It's going to happen quite soon.
You don't have time, so you're gonna have to.
You need to be.
What's your advice?
So potentially we could be at this for 10, 20 years.
So what's your advice?
You need to engage your plan B and make it plan A.
That's exactly what we're saying. Exit plan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Very gloomy afternoon, and it's sad that we have to bring news like this. It's a sad budget.
How much is the tax-free threshold? Sorry to interrupt.
I think 300 now.
300 what?
Dollars. I saw somewhere that the pensionable.
It's now taxable.
What?
Yeah, the COVID allowance is now taxable. But I think what we're trying to say is, capital is shy. And if you've got a bit of capital, spread your wings. Look across the border. There's a lot that's happening in Africa, in Zambia, in Kenya, everywhere around us. Rwanda, Uganda. There are lots and lots of opportunities. And I think that we hold a particular competitive advantage. And let's take advantage of it while we're still relatively able to do so. What's clear is that the 1% wealth tax that they've introduced, it's not enough. If you do the numbers, it's not enough. They're only going to increase it. And it's going to be very difficult for us to operate. But we must still give our shareholders value for their money. And for us to do so, I think that you need to spread your wings. But you've had it. Let's hear what you also think and believe, the nuggets from what you read about the budget. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful afternoon. I'm glad to be back.
We're glad to have you back.
There's always something.
Travel is kind to you. You're looking better than when you before you left.
I think it's a sign. Cheers.